Welcome back, everyone. I'm Jay and I got bored, so today we're going to turn this roll of aluminum foil into a ball. So before I begin, here's what I know. You ball up the foil, you hit it with a hammer, and eventually it'll cold forge into a solid ball. If you don't know what cold forging is, I'll get to that after we get the ball formed.
For this, the goal is to make the foil as tightly packed and as round as possible. The beginning and end bits have some glue on it, so I made sure to avoid using those pieces, since that wouldn't do well when you're trying to hammer it all together. Now that we're at the end of the roll, I just tear that off so that we don't get any of that gunk in there.
Well, now that we got it all balled up, as you can see here, it's a fairly large ball, which means that it's time to compress it. So we're going to use a combination of hammers
and an anvil. I know hardly anyone has one around the house, so if you don't, it's not a big deal. Just find something that's sturdy enough to take hammer blows. I picked the anvil and that big hammer up for a future project, so subscribe if you want to see me use it for what I actually bought it for. I'm using the 4-pound hammer to start the cold welding process. I figure the heavier the hammer, it's better to get the layers to compact the ball down quicker. I switched to a smaller hammer since my arm was getting tired by having to awkwardly swing that big one to avoid hitting the camera. I ended up moving to the floor for some more working space. But while I'm down here, I'll put me working in the corner and explain cold forging. I was planning on animating this, but I'm not that good at editing, so you're gonna have to put up with my Microsoft Paint recreation. Okay, basically what cold forging is we're gonna take two similar metals, like copper and aluminum, because this method works better with softer metals. And we're going to apply a force to it. In this case, it's going to be the hammering that we're doing. And as you strike with the hammer, these start to bond. And after you hit it enough, it becomes one solid piece. That's essentially what we're doing with the outside of the foil ball. As you can see how the foil started out to what it is now, we're very close. So I moved back to the table and switched to the smallest hammer I have because it's time to round out these flat spots left by the large hammer. In theory, the smaller strike face should leave smaller spots and make the ball round. This is just a guess since it's my first time doing this. Also, if I do this again, I'm going to wear gloves. If you notice how dirty my hands are, that stuff got everywhere while I was doing this. Once it becomes solid, it should start to sound like this. There's also a lot of little pock marks on the surface, but sanding should take care of that since it's the next step. For this, I'm using 10 different grits starting at 120 going all the way up to 2500. I'm also wet sanding to keep the dust as low as possible. I should have wore a respirator now that I think about it, so I probably have sparkly lungs now. The 120 grit was way too harsh and started tearing up the top layer of foil, so I switched to the next level and then worked my way up through all of them from there. Here's the 280 grit. The 360 grit. $400. $800. Here's the progress after a little over halfway through sanding. 1000 grit. And here it is. $1,500. 2,000. The 2500 still had it looking a bit dull, so I went into my modeling room and grabbed a 4000 grit polishing stick and a 7000 grit stick to help smooth out everything before I started actually polishing. Now that it's sanded and started to shine, I can see that this wasn't as round as I thought it was, which is a bit disappointing, but I'm too far along to start over. So let's get some polish on this and see how it turns out. I'm using Mother's brand aluminum polish, and with this you just rub it on until it turns black, and then you buff it up. There's a piece that cracked that I'm trying to get to lay flat with the hammer. It didn't really shine up the way I thought it would, so I went back to the 7000 grit sanding stick and redid the whole thing. And after 3 hours of polishing and sanding, here it is.
I learned a couple things while doing this. Even though it looks fine, those flat spots will show up when you start sanding. And I'm thinking if I used a smaller hammer instead, it would have made the surface smoother and this would look better after sanding. I think this is why those last couple rounds of sanding made it look shinier than the actual polish. Also, hitting it too hard and crushing it in parts quicker, depending on how hard you swing the hammer, could also be avoided with a smaller hammer. So basically just take your time. This took about 3 hours of hammering, and it really should have took about 5 hours, and most of these issues probably would have been avoided. I learned a lot. I think I got the technique down, and I had some fun with this one, so I may do another one in the future, but with a bit of a twist. I just know it doesn't need to be perfect. Good enough is fine, and I will see you in the next one.